Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Ashizawa, and I'm with the Japan Center for International Exchange, or JCIE. On behalf of our co-organizers, ERIA and the OIST Foundation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on innovation for healthy aging. This session will offer a diverse range of perspectives on the process of moving aging-related innovations from academic and research settings onto the market. JCIE and our partners at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or ERIA, have been holding a series of webinars as part of our broader programming on healthy longevity in Asia. Our activities are conducted under the auspices of the Government of Japan's Asia Health and Wellbeing Initiative, known as AWIN, and they include not only dialogues, but also policy briefs, data sharing, and an award program, the Healthy Aging Prize for Asian Innovation. This prize is intended to highlight innovative approaches to aging, including community-based innovations, innovations that support aging in place, and technological innovations. We're very excited to have two of our past prize winners with us today as speakers. They'll be sharing some insights into the challenges they faced and lessons they learned in developing their innovations. For more information on their work, as well as on the prize itself, you can visit our website at www.awin.org. That's AHWIN.org. The deadline for the 2022 prize is Monday, May 16th. So if you're interested in applying, you still have a little bit more time. For today's webinar, JCIE and ERIA are especially delighted to have an opportunity to partner with our friends at the Okinawa Institute for Science and Technology Foundation. OIST is a graduate research university, that's only a decade old, but it's quickly become one of the top research universities in the world in science and technology, both in terms of the research being produced and the application of innovations to real-world solutions. It's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Mr. David Janes, the Chief Advancement Officer for OIST and President and CEO of the OIST Foundation. David was previously the Director of Foundation Grants at the US-Japan Foundation, where he led the foundation's multi-million-dollar grant-making program for nearly 2 decades. David also holds 3 master's degrees, one in religion, one in sociology, and one in international affairs. And as anyone who knows him will tell you, he has a seemingly endless supply of energy and enthusiasm for creating these types of dialogues among diverse experts and for facilitating opportunities to learn from one another. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion among this great lineup of speakers. David, over to you.
Kim, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. The OIST Foundation, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Foundation, and OIST are so pleased to partner with you, JCIE, and of course, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia for tonight's, or if you're in Asia, this morning's webinar. This is an extremely exciting topic, innovating for healthy aging, and it is a topic of deep interest to OIST and the OIST Foundation. Before we jump into the discussion with our panelists, let me just say another word or two about OIST and the OIST Foundation. As Kim mentioned, OIST, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University, is an interdisciplinary and international graduate school in Okinawa that offers a 5-year PhD program in science. We have 250 students from over 50 countries. We're a young university, having opened around 10 years ago, but we aim to produce groundbreaking research for the benefit of all humankind. And in 2019, Nature magazine ranked us as #1 in Japan and #9 globally for scientific research quality. We're interested deeply in longevity and wellness-related research, which led to tonight's collaboration. The OIST Foundation is a US-based nonprofit located here in New York, and we support scientific breakthroughs, innovation, and the sustainable development of Okinawa through OIST, and we build US-Japan cooperation through science. We are a convener, a connector, and a funder. I am so honored to moderate tonight's panel with distinguished panelists, and I want to let you know that we will have time for you, the audience, to get engaged. So please write questions in the YouTube chat at any time. One of my colleagues will collect those and they will come to me, and we'll have time later on in the webinar to get to some of those. But without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. And what we're going to do is give each panelist several minutes to speak about tonight's topic, again, promoting the development and transfer of technology to improve the lives of older adults. And then after that, we'll move into a moderated discussion. So first, it's a deep pleasure to introduce my colleague at OIST, Lauren Ha. Lauren is Associate Vice President of the Technology Development and Innovation Center, we call it TDIC, at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University. She oversees programs to commercialize research at the university. And there's so much more I'd like to say about you, Lauren, but I think the audience would like to hear directly from you. So let me turn the floor over to you, please.
Thank you so much, David, for that introduction, and greetings from the beautiful island of Okinawa, Japan. I'm going to start actually with the bad. So I think we all realize that there are many challenges facing the world. But here's the good part. Science and technology can offer solutions to many of these global challenges, from infectious diseases to climate change, to an aging population, increased energy requirements, as well as food insecurity. And as David mentioned, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology is a new research institute and graduate university established by the Japanese government a little over 10 years ago. And if you can cue up the slides, that would be great. I want to show you what OIST actually looks like. This is not a fake picture. This is very real. In addition to its state-of-the-art facilities and prime location on the coast of the East China Sea, it has a really unique structure, with more than 50% of the faculty, students, and researchers recruited from around the world, English as the official language, and an interdisciplinary approach to problem solving with no academic departments. Next slide. And as a graduate university, research and education are obvious pillars, but at OIST, innovation, or the transformation of research and scholarship into societal impact, holds equal weight. Next slide. The research foundation on which innovation is based must be excellent. And as David also mentioned, as a young university, OIST is on the right track, having ranked first in Japan and ninth in the world for the quality of its scientific publications when normalized for size. Next slide, please. And the best young minds should come together. And at OIST, they gather from more than 40 countries. Next slide. And innovation is that link that brings together mind and hand to bring science to bear on societal problems. Next slide, please. But there's a real gap, a chasm actually, between research in the lab and innovation that can impact the world. This is just one of a number of valleys of death for new technologies. And bridging that gap requires elements that no single entity can provide alone. Next slide. So bringing new technologies from academic universities into the world depends on a host of characters. Companies that can transform technologies into products and services, governments providing regulatory environments that can adapt to disruptive innovation, patient investors with a healthy appetite for risk, startups that drive the creation of whole new industries, and physical spaces where all these players can gather, co-locate, and collaborate. And at OIST, we invest to de-risk new technologies that are coming out of the labs as much and for as long as possible. So how do we do this? Next slide, please. It starts with people, the best researchers in the world working in key areas that can impact people and the planet, from AI to health to new materials and sustainability. Next slide. Then we need to nurture the science. OIST devotes about 5% of its research budget to de-risk technologies through a proof of concept program. And you can see some examples of these proof of concept projects that we're nurturing in the area of healthy aging, including developing early detection and drug testing platforms for age-related disorders, non-invasive measurements for aging, as well as food as medicine. Next slide. And it's more than just providing budget, actually. It's a systematic way to link science to application by connecting researchers to experts, business experts, and understanding the market need. So proof of concept programs like this are critical elements to bridge that gap between science and impact. Next slide. Another important element is industry. So universities need a way to engage with industry as co-developers and really the ultimate beneficiaries of new technologies that are coming out of academic labs. And at OIST, we built an easy route for companies to reach into the university through a membership-based network called Innovation Network at OIST, or ENO. Next slide. But in some cases, the best route for new technologies is not through an existing company, but rather as a startup. Startups are capable of creating whole new industries. In addition to that, venture-backed startups are now the key drivers of economic growth in any part of the world. There was a new study of jobs that was done in the United States that found between 1990 and 2020, employment in venture-backed startups grew at 8 times the pace of employment in non-venture-backed startups. So startup companies actually have a profound effect on the growth of a region. So because of this, OIST created an accelerator program to recruit and fund entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world to incubate their companies in Okinawa. And here are some examples of 5 companies that we recruited to come from all over the world to come to Okinawa, 2 of which are developing technology to promote healthy aging. Next slide. And startups are not just the keys to bringing new technologies into the world, but they can also create ripple effects where successful entrepreneurs go on to create a cycle of socioeconomic benefits. Next slide. But we also need physical spaces for innovation. I mean, this concept of co-location, what used to be called clustering, is really important for partnering. I mean, despite the world becoming accustomed to Zoom meetings and remote working, for deep tech innovation that depends so much on lab facilities and teams of researchers, proximity still makes a big difference. Next slide. So OIST built an incubator, and it's not just an incubator for startups, but it's also a place for academic and industrial science to come together and collaborate with labs, co-working spaces, and specialized equipment to nurture deep tech innovation. Next slide. And we have plans to build even more physical spaces for innovation, spaces that can accommodate actually the full developmental stages of early stage startups, from seed stage to growth stage, and actually a place where we can provide business services that are very specific to startups rather than research, such as customer discovery and investor introductions. Next slide. And all of this needs to take place within a supportive regulatory environment. I think we all understand that government policies can either advance or hinder innovation. So it's important for universities like OIST to prioritize a good working relationship with local and national governments, where we can actually lobby for things like regulatory sandboxes, tax incentives, and entrepreneur visas. Next slide. And let's not forget the element of venture capital. Venture capital is one of the most effective ways to give new technologies a chance to make it to the market. The challenge in Japan is that despite growing 10 times in the last 10 years, venture capital available for startups in Japan is still only 2% of what is available for startups in the US. So for many of us who are not in the US, what do? At OIST, we network with venture capital firms around the world. We make a close partnership with one of them, which you'll see here, which we partnered with Beyond X Ventures, a venture capital firm in Japan. And we will establish our own university venture capital fund. And I'm pleased to say that in 2 weeks, we will announce our university venture fund. So we look forward to bringing that to the world. Next slide. And in closing, I wanted to really summarize that there are a number of challenges in bringing new technologies to the world, and universities like OIST that are seeding these new technologies are making strong efforts to try to de-risk them and nurture them as long as possible before we bring them to the world. And to do that, we are looking at the whole process, not just what's happening in the lab, but also what needs to happen outside of the lab. Next slide. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Lauren, thank you so much for that rich presentation. Really appreciate it and look forward to the discussion as well. Next, I am so pleased to introduce you to Siti Ahmad. She is joining us from Malaysia. She is the director of the Malaysian Research Institute on Age at the University Putra, Malaysia. Siti won the 2021 Special Prize for COVID-19 Response of the Healthy Aging Prize for Asian Innovation. So excited to have you here, and congratulations. And just one more word on the prize, the specific piece of which she won. During the COVID-19 pandemic, contactless delivery suddenly became a critical tool to limit the spread of the disease and facilitate social distancing. So her group, the Malaysian Research Institute on Aging, launched a program in 2020 to respond to this need, developing an autonomous robot that could make contactless deliveries in long-term care settings. How interesting. Siti, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for the kind introduction, and also thank you to JCIE, OIS, and Area for inviting me today in this program to share about our project. So maybe Aki can share my slide, please. Thank you. Okay, to share our project titled Capacity Building for Caregivers and Older Persons in Elderly Living Institution for Contactless Deliveries using Indoor Autonomous Platform. Well, the title is quite mouthly. Anyway, the project is supported by USAID, CEO Hun and Michael Rosen. Okay, next I'm Siti Ahmad, can call me Siti, and I'm the director of Malaysian Research Institute on Aging, University Putra Malaysia. And in the same time, I am an academician at Department of Electrical Electronic Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, also in UPM. So next, let me introduce a bit about my aging. So our main function, we are National Research Institute. The main function is to conduct research and services in the field of older persons and aging in Malaysia. So we were first established in 2002. Known as Institute of Gerontology in UPM, and in 2015 we've been rebranded by the Malaysian Cabinet and been recognized as the National Institute for Aging. So as you can see the background picture, so that is our new complex. We moved into the new complex called My Aging Integrated Complex to support our program and activities in promoting productive, healthy and active aging. So we are responsible. The first one is to conduct research in aging and older persons, coordination and innovation of research in aging studies. You know, this field is a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral. So we function as to coordinate. Prioritization of resources, limited resources in preparing for our aged society. And the fourth one, My Aging as one-stop referral center for information related to aging research and development. And we are working on these three niche areas, social gerontology, medical gerontology, and also gerontechnology. Next, please. Okay, let me share with everyone a population aging trends in Malaysia. So this is our age sex pyramid from 1950 until 2020. So as we can see, the whole world, we can see the increased number of older persons due to two factors: decrease in fertility rates in the younger generation, and also increase in life expectancy. And in Malaysia, we are expected to become age society by 2030, where 14% of our total population is 60 years old and above. Next. And in 2020, the whole world was hit with COVID-19, and Malaysia is not excluded. And I'm just sharing a newspaper cutting about COVID-19 and older persons in Malaysia. We have outbreak, many cases in nursing homes. So we are addressing these issues in Malaysia during that time. We know this is very important. There are many issues, and we are tackling one of them through, next slide please, through contactless innovation. So we know there are, during pandemic, we cannot move, most of the countries are in lockdown. So contactless innovation is very important and keep us moving. So of course, there are contactless philanthropy, contactless fund, contactless news, everything is contactless, protection and delivery. And we are looking into one solution, which is on contactless delivery through our autonomous platform. So in general, autonomous platform is steered without human involvement. I know maybe some of us driving Tesla, so okay, and then move by detecting the surrounding area using sensors. So another terms for autonomous platform, I just shared with this because we have different audience. So autonomous platform, also known as driverless robot, self-driving or autonomous robot. Okay, next please. Okay, in this project, the objective is we want to develop autonomous platform to provide contactless alternative to regular deliveries in our nursing homes. And then after develop, we want to, of course, we need to introduce the products, the innovation to the caregivers. So we conduct on-site training and workshop for contactless deliveries to strengthen the capacity of aged care operators and caregivers in the care management of older persons. And in the same time, we develop comprehensive guidelines and user manual for this platform. So as you can see in the picture, that we developed two platforms and also come together with the user manual and also guidelines. Next. And this the structure and the operation. So we're using LiDAR technology, cameras, and microcontroller, a part of the structure. And for the operation, it's a very straightforward. We know who will be the user. We try to design a very simple solution, easy to teach, easy to operate. So using QR code, and the caregivers will put the food, for example, on the tray, and they just scan QR code where they want to deliver. And after they complete the delivery, then the platform will return back to the control station. And after developing this, okay, next slide, please. Okay, we conduct 2 days training. During this time, it's still we're still in lockdown, but little bit loosened because of the numbers not that high during this time. We managed to conduct face-to-face workshop before the cases increase again later that year. Okay, so we split the workshop into 2 days. Okay, it consists of hands-on and also lecture, and we invite our participants, our caregivers, older persons, and other students, our staff as well. So we can only limit participants maximum 25 because that is the limit during that time. And then during the workshop, okay, next. During the workshop, we collect feedback from the participants. So I'm not about 80% of the participants, they never heard of the autonomous platform. It's very new to them. Not just for the caregivers, of course, all the persons, this is very new to them. And we want to see from the workshop, we want to see the level of their knowledge and skill. And we can see before the workshop, they have very little knowledge and skill in autonomous platform. However, after the workshop, the knowledge and skill have been increased. And we also, next. We also ask their feedback for improvement and what are the difficulties that they face when using that platform. So most of them, because they want interactive robot, they want a robot that can communicate with them, and then they want simple operation. And if you look at the difficulties for our elderly in Malaysia, it's less educated, so not easy to use the device. So we have to try to design it as simple as possible, but can do the main function. Okay, next. Okay, so as a conclusion, we found that by using lecture and hands-on approach, they are more effective and give a better understanding on what and how to use the platform. And most of the participants, they didn't know what is autonomous platform. And when we send the invite to all our contacts, they joined because the term autonomous platform, they want to know what is autonomous platform. And of course, by the end of the workshop, the expected deliveries and the objectives are successfully achieved, which are to strengthen the capacity of the caregivers and all the persons on the use of technology. So this is a good introduction on technology to them, and to increase awareness how technology can be used to in their daily life and improving their quality of life. And from the feedback that we received, the work on this autonomous platform is still continue. We improve the platform based on the participant feedback. We have add a microphone platform that communicate with user, come with music, simpler instruction, and also we have add home function. Continuous engagement and capacity building with all the home, other homes and older person. We're still doing that now. And then the last one, this is I think very important, not just for autonomous platform, but to conduct digital inclusion activities for older persons. As you know, during pandemic, we rely too much on our mobile devices and older persons also. And then if people think it's ageism, they don't know how to use. I think this is very wrong. They love to learn technology. Yes, of course, their learning rate may be slower, but they really want to learn. And then we are keep our engagement of our older persons in increasing awareness and usage of digital. So next. So the end, that's all. This is my team. Okay, this is my team. The project, we received the project. The project is only for a very short term, 3 months. We have to complete within 3 months. That is a requirement from the funder. So for the first 2 months, we develop all the system, and at final month, we conduct the training. And thank you very much for the COVID Special Award that we received from Area, JCIE, and AWIN. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, Siti, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and congratulations again to you and your team on winning the Healthy Aging Prize for Asian Innovation. Next, it's a real pleasure to introduce another winner of the award, Lilian Eng, who is joining us from Singapore. She is the co-founder and managing director of Etsuya Healthcare Holdings. And again, she's the 2021 Grand Prize winner of the Healthy Aging Prize for Asian Innovation. She won that for a project which I think she's going to tell us about, called Cares for Wounds, which uses digital technology and artificial intelligence to provide a comprehensive system for wound assessment and management. Chronic wounds are a particularly prevalent issue among older people in care facilities, and this innovation streamlines the process for evaluation and treatment. So without further ado, Lilian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, for a very kind introduction. And thank you, JCIE, and also OIST for organizing this wonderful event. So it's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure for me to be able to be amongst the thought leaders in this field, to be sharing a little bit on our journey. So I really like what I heard from Lauren in terms of, the amount of effort and resource poured into helping startups commercialize the technologies right in the real world. And I'm also very inspired by what Siti shared in terms of how their team actually, swung into action and created something so powerful, right, within 3 months. So I think for my section, I just want to have a little bit of a grounded sharing in terms of the journey that we've been through and also the challenges we continue to face. So some of the mountaintops, victory, and also some of the groaning, so to speak, in the valley. So maybe you can bring up the slides. The next one, please. Thank you. So a little bit of introduction about who we are. So Tetsuya Healthcare is actually co-founded by myself and a Dr. Shinsuke Muto from Japan, right? So Dr. Muto obviously, has had many years of experience in community care. He started off as a cardiologist and became very, very involved, right, in community care and technology to help community care in Japan. And I actually came from a completely different industry. I was a banker, right, that actually, came, so to speak, saw the light and came out of the dark place into the health tech industry about 7 years ago. So Dr. Muto and I actually met at INSEAD during our EMBA program. And as some of you may know, INSEAD actually has a motto that says business as a force for good, right? And little did we know that, to be in part of this drive basically cost a lot in terms of, the time and the effort and the resource. And obviously, some heartache as well as we come along this journey. So we started this organization with the intention to use technology, right, to transform community care, especially in the intermediate and long-term care sector. So we've been very privileged to be able to, do this for some of our care providers in the community care sector in Singapore, particularly in helping them improve their productivity and quality of care. And along that journey, we managed to also win a couple of awards, including the Happy Award last year. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Right, next. So our infrastructure, if you may, or the ecosystem we've created within our organization is to ground it on a very powerful care management system called CARES, right? And that, in a way, is the control center, if you may, of the entire operations for community care. Because we realize that community care can be very fragmented. Because as people come out of hospitals, into home care, into nursing homes, into center-based care, into primary care, there are just so many different touch points, right, that require the care providers, the doctors, the nurses, the therapists to know about, the developments of the patient themselves. And when the patient decides, or the patient has to be readmitted to hospital, there's also a lot of the information that the hospitals need to know. So CARES really act as a backbone, right, to all this information sharing, right? And as a augmentation to that, we have companion mobile apps such as CARES for Caregiver and also CARES for Wounds that allows the care providers to actually capture all this data so that all this information goes into CARES for continuous monitoring at a remote level. So CARES for Wounds, which is the solution which we won the Happy Award for, is actually an AI-enabled mobile application that speaks with CARES, right, to allow the care provider in a, let's say, institution to be able to remotely monitor and supervise the caregiving of wound in the community, be it in a home care setting, in a primary care setting, or in a nursing home setting. Right, next. So just to give a little bit of a background as to how CARES for Wounds work, is in essence a mobile application, right, that uses AI, right, to detect, measure, and to assess the wound. So this actually helps to bridge some of the skill gaps that we see in the community where many of the care providers may not be very knowledgeable in terms of what wound assessment really is about. So it allows the care provider to have a very standardized, very systematic, and very instantaneous manner of actually capturing the wound details, the image, the measurements, and the assessment. Then it actually then transmits all this information onto the cloud platform so that more knowledgeable clinicians can then monitor, right? And when interventions are required, it's a lot more accelerated, it's a lot more instantaneous, and everyone is talking off the same hymn sheet, right? So I think that's also a powerful way in which we standardize and transform how wound management is done in the community. Next. So why do we do what we do, right? I mean, I think technology aside, obviously there's a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of sexiness to the technology, because when people hear about AI, they go, wow, this is so exciting, right? But there is a impetus as to why we even went through this journey. And I will spend a bit of time to explain how arduous it has been. But in essence, we realized that there was a real pain point, right, in the community where diabetes is actually very prevalent. I think in many developed societies and developing societies as well, diabetes in a way is one of the major enemy, right, for public health. So 1 in 10, right, adults actually have been diagnosed with diabetes, and to our knowledge, 1 in 4 of them, of those people with diabetes, would actually have some form of a diabetic foot ulcer at some point in their life, right? And what is actually less known is that even in a developed society where healthcare is so advanced in Singapore, actually close to about 1 in 3 actually also has a amputation sometime in their life as a result of diabetic foot ulcer, right? And every 30 seconds, right, actually 1 foot is actually being lost to diabetic foot ulcer. And in fact, we all know that this is completely avoidable if care can be a little bit more, real time, and also if we can get interventions a bit more speedily. Right, next. Next, please. Thank you. Yeah. So of course, we also do know that apart from the suffering of the patient, the pain, right, that they have to endure, this is also a real impact on public health care. A lot of money every year basically is being spent on treating, all forms of chronic wounds, including diabetic foot ulcers. And you can see in this chart, right, that, in fact, the amount of money being, spent on wound management is actually increasing, right? And that is also one of the reasons why we know that at some point, right, this will have to stop. And in order for us to be able to overcome, all these challenges, a solution such as care for wounds is actually imperative, right? And that's why we took the hit and decided that, despite, the difficulties that we know that we will endure, we actually went ahead with actually developing cares for wounds. And we're very, very glad, right? In that journey, we actually managed to get a lot of support, not just from the government, but also basically from the public healthcare sector, whereby we had many co-creators that came alongside with us. And after about 3 to 4 years, after the regulatory approval process, we managed to actually commercialize that about 2 years ago, right? And obviously now it is adopted in the community setting and also the nursing homes in Singapore. Next. So the footprint that we've had, I think over the last 4 to 5 years, in fact, if you do look at this chart, maybe about 2-3 years, maybe about 2-3 months, in fact, ago, you would see a few more, right? A few more touch points. And we've actually removed that because I just wanted to kind of like also share this journey in terms of commercialization and really kind of taking some ideas into the real world. So I think Lauren probably will also attest to that we always start this journey with a lot of hypotheses, right? And sometimes, we hear about how companies or technology companies basically try to create a problem to solve, right? We came into this journey thinking that we have a real problem that we are actually trying to solve, and we have actually attached the technology to solve that problem. But as we try to actually commercialize that, we come to realize that in some markets, sometimes it doesn't work that way. And there are many reasons for such, so-called, wrong hypothesis, which we will share later on in the slide that we have. But in essence, I think, in these 3 markets that, we've seen in this, we're looking at this chart, we have seen some level of success, right? I think, in Japan, basically, at least during the pandemic, we have been able to, use cares for wounds in a meaningful way to help mobile nurses actually overcome the pain point of not getting specialist wound nurses to be able to do the home visits, right? So through cares for wounds, we were able to actually get a lot of that assessments done remotely by a wound nurse in a hospital, partnered, right, with a mobile nurse that's on ground. So we were able to spring to action, 12 sites with the help of the University of Tokyo. And the actually outcomes were fantastic because we were able to establish or prove the point that even with remote wound management, actually the outcomes sometimes beat, having a wound nurse having to come down all the way from the university hospital to see the patient. And for those reasons, we actually also managed to get this case published in one of the notable journals, and it's out for publication in June. The second use case, which I think we have done, I would say quite well, is in Singapore. I think in Singapore itself, we have been able to, like I said, find many partners in crime, right, on the technology side of things, on the hospital level, and of course, the government funding as well has helped a lot. So in the hospital itself, we found a co-creator, right, Rinsa Hospital, who actually journeyed with us throughout this whole process, gave us a lot of insights in terms of what are the pain points that the users really confront. And I think like what Siti mentioned earlier on, the last mile, right, in terms of technology adoption is always the most difficult because we come into the picture with some grand idea that it's going to be maybe a certain manner of execution, but we go into the trenches realizing that that's not what users actually generally want. So like what Siti said, what we think is easy to use, the minute it basically gets into the hands of the users, is a completely different picture altogether, because to them, when they're on the ground, they realize that they actually need to do it very, very quickly. And in home care, they realize that they can't even use two hands to actually do a wound assessment with a mobile phone. They only have one hand because the other hand basically goes to propping up the client's butt, right? So there are many, many different scenarios where we had to actually make changes to the UI itself in order to be able to help the user actually get to the actual experience that they want. So in Singapore, we actually managed that. And I think, like I mentioned, about 2 years ago, we actually got our HSA Class B approval. And today, we are glad to announce that, the system itself actually is used in a number of community hospitals, nursing homes, and we are hopeful, fingers crossed, that the acute hospitals will be adopting them soon as well. Right. Hong Kong is another market which I think we have done fairly well. It's still small and early days, but minimally, we've been able to actually penetrate nursing homes through distributors. At the same time, also, we have been able to get into the universities as a teaching tool. So I would say that this footprint basically gives us the encouragement that there is a lot more, right, that we can do outside of these three markets that we've done well. In those markets that we've actually tried, for example, Philippines, Malaysia, maybe even China, the reasons why, maybe the next slide would be good. Okay, maybe the next slide. Thank you. The reason why we may not have done so well, and in fact had to actually withdraw a little bit, is potentially because of regulatory, because, for example, as a startup, you realize that we need to be very defined in terms of where we spend our dollars. So if a regulatory pathway becomes very, very difficult, sometimes we may opt not to actually proceed, because the investment, right, that goes behind regulatory approval could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars and may take years, right? And secondly, I think, what we also realize is that the funding and business model for a technology like ours may not be necessarily applicable in those countries or those markets. In China, for example, the ecosystem, I would say, is a little bit not as established, even though it's actually a fairly advanced market. A lot of that so-called affinity is towards what we call hardware. They do not have a philosophy of the software and an ecosystem to support a certain care model. So even though we have a good technology, when we fit into a market like China, actually the questions they ask us is, who's going to pay? Who will pay for a system like this? Is it the hospital? Is it the care provider? Is it the patient themselves? So we realized very quickly that in a market like this, when these questions have no answers, then as a provider of this technology, we actually really cannot, proceed very far unless, right, there is I would say a change maker or some form of a support, right, that will help us anchor that change. Malaysia, I would say to some extent is a little bit similar because, even though the public healthcare sector is very, very developed, the private healthcare sector basically depends a lot, and because insurance is not as advanced, a lot on the patient paying for themselves. And again, that question about who's going to pay, how much can they pay, right? And how quickly, right, can they pay? It's also something which became a real pain point for us. So, and Philippines, the need is there. I think the demand really is there for a good wound management system. And in fact, I think the health providers there are actually very well equipped in terms of good philosophies in terms of wound management, but the affordability is really lacking. And again, we were confronted with the question is, how much can they pay, right? And on those grounds, also, I think, in Malaysia and also in the Philippines, one of the issues that we were confronted with was really something as simple as Wi-Fi connection, right? For AI-enabled tool like this, without AI connection, there is actually literally no way in which a proper wound assessment can be completed, right? And we were found, and obviously, if a lot of them are going to store their information on their own mobile phone, it becomes a security risk for us. It becomes a data breach risk for us. And again, quickly, we had to retreat because we realized that this is not something we're prepared to confront. So for those reasons, right, I think, that's a good learning point for us, whereby we started with a lot of, aspirations to conquer the world, so to speak, and realized that a lot of these so-called new world were not for us to take. So I think we have retreated, but I think we are at a better place right now and looking to perhaps markets, where hopefully, a technology like ours is well suited and would await, right, that development around the rest of the world for us to basically have a second chance at it, right? So that's our sharing. And I think maybe the last slide is a concluding note that the last slide, Aki. Yeah. As a concluding note that, it really takes a village, right, to raise a child. And I think it takes a village and even more, right, to raise a global village, so to speak, to raise a startup. And I think Lauren basically will also attest to that, there's many, many different parts and very many different partners that comes into, the fruition of something that can be successful commercially. Right. And obviously, these are the people, on the sheet that you can see, on the deck that you can see, who have helped us along this journey. And we look forward to many more friends along the way that can bring us into the world, right? And to conquer the world that, really needs a solution such as Cares for Wounds. Right. So with that, thank you very much. I look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Lilian, thank you so much for that extremely rich presentation. We learned so much. And again, congratulations to you as well on winning the Healthy Aging Prize for Asian Innovation. Next, it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Rosen. He is the Emeritus Chief Wellness Officer at Cleveland Clinic, located or headquartered in Ohio. And for those of you, if you're looking at you'll see his screen in just a minute, you'll see that he is a well-known and best-selling author. And one of his books is The Great Age Reboot, Cracking the Longevity Code for a Younger Tomorrow. And another one that is quite well known is What to Eat When, a strategic plan to improve your health and life through food. And he is also the developer of the Real Age concept. Michael, it's such a pleasure to have you here. The floor is yours.
Unmute. David, thank you very much. And congratulations to the two winners. And I too am appreciative of OIST and the other sponsors. If we can go right to the slides, I'm going to try and go through it. You can click through this. This is just to introduce myself, that you're going to be able to reboot your age. Whereas on the next slide, we have been at 60 is the new 40 now. That is, if you do healthy things, you can make yourself 20 years younger than your calendar age. We believe that within a decade, with at least an 80% probability, 90 can be the new 40. That is, you're going to get an extra 30 years of productive life expectancy. And with that, it won't be older age, but it'll be extending your youth. Next slide, please. Since the about 1880 or so, we've extended life expectancy by about 2.5 years every decade. But in this next decade, if you can go back 2 clicks, if you would, in the next decade, we expect that you're going to be able to get an exponential increase. Why? Because there are 14 areas of research that all have shown in at least 2 animal species that they're going to be able to extend life expectancy greatly. There has been a great increase in money and research interest in the basic mechanisms of aging. I liken it to, there's an exponential increase in this funding and this interest as evinced by this conference. So if you will, one linear step taken 30 times is 30 meters closer to your endpoint. One exponential step taking 30 times is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc., is 26 times around the world. And that's how fast the research is going. Next slide, please. And if you look at it, there are 14 areas, as I've said. One of the areas, senolytics, the harvesting of old cells that make the cells next to them function older. Next slide, please. So one of these is therapeutic plasma exchange. This is a randomized controlled study, and you see what happens is in the active treatment group, the red cells are harvested, given back to the patient, whereas their plasma is cleaned and given back to them. Next slide, please. In patients with Alzheimer's disease, next slide. If you look at the far panel in the upper right, you'll see that the orange is the active treatment group. The dark color, blue on my screen, is in fact the control group. This is the first demonstration of a reversal of cognitive dysfunction in mild Alzheimer's disease, shown for each of the areas, each of the cognitive functions studied. You actually reversed and improved it. They did 5 months of one treatment a week for 8 weeks, and then one treatment for the next 5 months. And by 15 months, there was a reversal. This is just one of the areas, as all of these are moving into human trial, all 14 areas. Next slide, please. And you can click through to the end on this slide, but these are the 14 areas. And just to show you, each one of them has moved into at least 2 animal species, many into human trials. The last one, epigenetic reprogramming, started with the Yamanaka factors from Japan and the Nobel Prize that he won. Next slide, please. And this shows the mouse model with the 4 Yamanaka factors. If you only use 3 of them, now shown, but this is, you get an epigenetic reboot to reboot yourself back to your original factory settings. If you use the analogy of a car, where we've been is we've changed the oil multiple times to keep us young. What the Yamanaka factors do is essentially give us a new engine. And in this study, you see, using these not only made the old mice young, but made their organs young. This has now been shown not only in San Diego and Alameda County, California, but at MIT and Harvard, duplicated also in Switzerland, and now with the Coleco group of the Google moonshots. Next slide, please. All of these, as I said, are moving into humans. But what do you do until they're here? Well, for example, to preserve your brain, there are 33 things that have been shown in at least 2 studies that show how you can keep your brain young. 2 of them are, for example, the speed of processing games for the brain, which in 18 hours of practice over a 10-year period, just 1.8 hours per year, decreased dementia frequency by 49%. And physical activity, by stressing a muscle, you turn on a gene that produces a small protein, arisen, that goes to the brain and releases brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which again keeps your brain younger. Next slide, please. So what do we have to curate these for individuals so they know exactly what to choose? And that's personalized to them is a personalized Reboot app, so they don't waste time or money on things that aren't, in fact, scientifically proven and valid for them. Next slide. So that's the Reboot Your Age app that has personalization and that is directed to the individual so they know what to do until these scientific advances come along, and then where they are so they could get therapeutic plasma exchange, or where the stem cell therapies actually might work and how many stem cells they need for that function. Next slide, please. We have been at rejuvenation, that is getting oil changes that keeps you young. Where we're going is regeneration, a new engine to, in fact, reboot yourself so when you're 90, you will feel 40. This changes everything in the economics and population dynamics of countries. Next slide. So, for example, if you're 45, when you were born, your life expectancy in the developed world was around 77, 3 years less for men. And now it may be 120. That is, instead of 32 more years, you've got 75 more years. Most of those are going to be productive. You won't need wound care. You won't need, if you will, contactless delivery. Both of those will be needed, but not till way near the end, just as they are now. Most of the years you're going to be productive. Next slide. And in fact, of the 157 million people increase in the United States we expect, more than 50% of it will be in people over the age of 80, but they aren't functioning as now people over the age of 80 function. They're going to be functioning as they're 40 or 35. Next slide. What does this do to the economy? Well, it means that, in fact, there will be more compounding of good decisions. There will be more tax revenue because you'll be working. If you're going to live 30 years longer, you're going to work 20 years longer rather than getting bored. And that will be tax revenue and will help support those people who do retire after that 20 years. We'll have fewer children as the, if you will, fertility rates are going down around the world, and that will mean less money spent for that. In fact, in the US, we will end up balancing the budget with a lower tax rate. All of us should be happy who are listening in the United States for that, but it will lower the tax burden, in fact, as people work longer. Next slide, please. But you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's what the Reboot app is all about. It's to help you learn to take care of yourself, and that's the way you'll be able to care for others. Next slide, please. And as I said, my conflicts are that I have written 4 #1 New York Times bestsellers. Hopefully this one, which comes out later, will be one. And the other conflict I have is I am at the Cleveland Clinic, which is a site of innovation, as many of you know. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Michael, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm glad to know that 90 is going to be the new 40, and look forward to hearing some more words of wisdom and lessons from you. But thank you so much for that. We are, with the permission of all the panelists, we're going to extend this dialogue for 10 to 15 minutes to take some questions. And I hope all of you can stick with us for that amount of time. So we can put all the panelists on the screen here. And again, I want to thank all of you for incredible presentations, Lauren, Siti, Lilian, and Michael. That was extremely robust, and I'm sure you all have some questions for each other, which we maybe can get to if there's something urgent. But let me just jump right in to some questions that have come to us. The first one is, and I'm just going to read it. I'm interested in the affordability of age tech. How can age-focused technology be implemented at scale given rapid aging trends around the world? What can be done to make elder-focused innovations more affordable for health systems in various countries as the need for them grows? This individual is working on a story about how aging is reshaping Japan for National Geographic's upcoming issue, which is going to be devoted to the topic of longevity. So I guess in terms of the affordability of age tech, I wonder, Lauren, if I might be able to turn to you first.
So there, of course, are a couple of ways to get price points to where consumers can take up new technologies. One is, of course, working on the technology and making sure that what is developed, if it's a medical device or some tech-related device, that the technologies that are going into these products are affordable. And then I think the second and probably most powerful way is to work with insurance companies in whatever country you are, to ensure that therapies, interventions can be supported by insurance companies.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Lilian, Siti, or Mike, anyone else want to comment on the question of the affordability of age tech? Lilian, did you have any?
I'll just quickly say that if you are going to be in the workforce for if you're going to live 30 more years and are in the workforce for 20 years, everything becomes very affordable. Let me give you the one example I showed. I showed therapeutic plasma exchange. In fact, students are now paid, graduate students and others are paid to donate plasma. So instead of that being a cost, it's actually a revenue. They earn money by donating plasma that then gets cleaned up in the same process, and you get rid of senolytic cells. So instead of that being a cost, that's actually a under cost, if you will, once these are developed. So we expect the technology, which of the 14 we don't know, but some of them are fairly expensive, some of them are very cheap. But again, they're all very inexpensive if you're going to live 30 more healthy years.
Very interesting. Lilian.
Sure, thanks. So my sense is that actually there are maybe two parts to that question. One is, of course, how this technology basically is delivered, right? In terms of perhaps the affordability of, let's say, the hardware or the software itself, how it's being approached, whether in a fragmented model or basically at a so-called consolidated model. So in public healthcare systems, obviously, government plays a very big role. So if they can bring all these different so-called capabilities together, the delivery, because of the scale, can be a lot more affordable. So that's one dimension of it. Now, the second dimension of it, obviously, would be that affordability also depends on who pays, right? I mean, if it's going to be funded by insurance or it's going to be funded by government, the out-of-pocket definitely, is something that may become a bit more affordable, right? So in that sense, if a technology, to Lauren's point, it's matched to a certain funding from government because of the public healthcare spending, or it's actually matched with a certain insurance program, then the affordability for the end user becomes a bit lower. So to me, I think that's the two so-called discussion points that the person who is actually developing the technology should be aware of.
Thanks so much for that. Siti, I want to turn to you with a different question, if I may. Another member of the audience has written, what's a good example of good incentives for innovation? And I thought you might give us a sense of, what was your motivation for some of the innovations you've come up with, and what do you think are some good incentives for people to be innovative in this particular field?
Okay, in my opinion, so when I joined my aging, I worked a lot with older persons a lot, and then a good incentive is they love to learn. Okay, they love to learn and they want to learn that technology, not just many things. And they're still very excited to learn, not just technology, anything, gardening, just to keep them live actively and still can produce. And nowadays there are many resources for them to learn. Of course, because of the pandemic, everybody is all the older persons, they are very used to online meetings, Zoom, whatever platform. They are very good, even better. So then we can see it's never too late to introduce technology, innovation, whatever you want to do. It's never too late. Okay, and then of course, apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, from that autonomous platform, there are many still technologies. I mean, Lillian apps just now. But the issues again, how to teach them, how to make them use. I mean, they have limited capabilities of their eyesight and then their hand movement. So you have to consider many things when you want to design for all the persons for them. So that is my opinion, David. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's another question here, which I'm going to just open it up to the whole panel, whoever wants to jump in, and I'll read the question. But I think the way to summarize it is, how do we get older people involved in actually creating some of these innovations? Let me read the question, and then whoever wants to jump on it, please jump on in. But the question is, does ageism play a role in technology transfer when it comes to developing products that specifically target older people? For example, in what kind of products people find attractive to develop, or even in terms of a lack of representation of older people in groups that are developing products specifically targeted at them? How can this be addressed? So Mike, you've got your hand up.
Well, the three co-authors of the book are 76, 74, and 95. All have continued to work and pay into Social Security continuously. So the Reboot Your Age app is directed at older people by older people to make us all younger. And I agree with Siti that the reward is seeing people being healthy and productive much longer and having passion for what they do. So all of us have passion for what we do. So the incentives are there. We expect, if you will, in America, we sell a lot of beer and wine, and the over 65 buys more beer and wine, David, than the under 35, yet no beer or wine ad is targeted at the over 65 population. We expect to see massive changes in the way marketing is done as older people function younger and have more money.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Lilian, Lauren, or Siti, any comments on how to engage older people in the technology transfer process? Anyone want to, Lilian?
Yeah, so just chime in a little bit. I mean, I think at the end of the day, all of us are drawn to things that are important to us, right? So in areas such as family engagement, social interactions, I feel the older people have actually come into the forefront, of adoption, especially in this pandemic. So you see many old people suddenly, taking on to, Zoom meetings, being able to engage very well. And I think if we can touch on what's important for them, they become very good teachers for us, right? They become very good teachers for us, and they will teach us what to make for them, right? And of course, that them becomes us eventually. So if we can just really consider what is important and use their insights to build that technology, I think that will be something that will be very, very useful for them eventually. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please.
Maybe I can add a bit. So I think all of us love social interaction, and older persons also, they love social interaction. And then when we have the opportunity to gather around, and then we usually incorporate social interaction, and in the same time there is a engagement session what we want to introduce. For like example, technology. I mean, we did our digital literacy program. It's so enjoyable to see them how they love camera, how to take selfies. Small thing for us, but then they are very excited. We have older persons like 80 years old and above join us for this digital literacy program, and how to use Facebook, how to share using Facebook. I mean, for us it's a small thing, little things. We thought it's very easy, but for them it's a achievement, and then you can see their satisfaction in learning new things. So, but of course we need to do more programs, attachment, engagement with them. Either we go to them or they come to us. So that's what we do in My Aging.
Thanks so much, Siti. We have a few more minutes and so many questions, and I wish we had another 4 hours, but let me try to just rapidly turn to a few more questions. One question is really from me, and it's to you, Mike. When you were speaking, I was thinking, I work with a university in Japan, and universities, of course, typically work with a certain age group. And I think there clearly will be a demand and a need for educational institutions to transform, to be able to work with and engage with an older population that's looking to continue to grow intellectually. I just wonder, you must think about this a lot. What are your thoughts or advice to institutions of education, colleges and universities in particular? How should they be thinking about transforming for the future?
Well, they have to start experimenting. And we have several, such as Northeastern in the United States, that is now doing huge number of programs for the retraining people as they go on, and retraining, because you're going to have three careers. If you're going to work for not for 40 years, but for 60 years, you're going to need to be retrained. In addition, since fertility rates are declining all over, it's an economic imperative for the institutions to be involved with the elderly and to help them. I don't know, it's a great movie script to see people going back to college at age 90, but it probably won't happen full time. So we expect, in fact, that there will be different periods of education, and there will be different ways of making it fun, so that people over the age of 70 will go back and retrain and keep retraining. So you're exactly right, David. We spend a lot of time thinking about it, and in fact, housing changes dramatically. So in the book, we put in some of our thoughts on each of these things. Even the age of basketball players, since we're in the playoffs now in the United States, will change. So if you're 90 and functioning as 40, remember some of the best players are still playing at age 40.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for that. I know that the time is getting late and some of our panelists need to leave, and I'm sure the audience does too. So I think what I would like to do is, first of all, I want to thank all of you for spending your valuable time with all of us tonight. I think clearly we need a round two where we just go into a dialogue with each other. I do want to give each of you just 30 seconds or so for any final remarks you'd like to make. And that could be broad, or maybe something about what makes Asia appealing as a hub for development in this area. Let me turn to you, Lilian, first, and then I'll go on from there. Lilian, please.
Right. Thanks for the comments, David. I think Asia obviously is a very exciting hub for aging innovation. Obviously, it sounds like one market, but it's actually a very diverse market with different needs. So my sense would be that, in terms of innovation, it could start with an advanced market like, for example, Singapore, but we do hope to see how we can actually use some of the new thoughts, new thinking to actually reach out to the rest of Asia as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lilian. Mike, could I turn to you for final comments?
Yes, I think aging is universal. That is, the fertility rates are going down throughout the world. Asia's actually been leading, and Japan is a great model to see, and all of Asia is a great model to see what we can do and how fast we can help people to become younger again, and what will their habits change as they change their vitality. So I think the world is going to be one market. I will just say one more thing. Remember to take care of yourself, because in fact, 50% of caregivers die before the person they're caring for. So you've got to take care of yourself to be able to care for others.
Good advice. Thank you so much, Michael. Lauren, please.
Right. So I don't think I could do a better promotion of Japan as a place, as a model for aging innovation and research than Mike did. But I will promote Okinawa actually a little bit because, within Japan, Okinawa is a globally known blue zone. So, and in addition to that, we now have OIST, which is a world-class research and educational university that not only is conducting research, but actually is promoting the transformation of that research into innovation to help in this area. So we look forward to actually welcoming anybody who wants to develop their technologies here. So please contact us.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And last but certainly not least, Siti.
Maybe I just add a bit. I mean, like Mike mentioned just now, aging is universal. So, but in Asian countries, the rate is very fast. We are moving, most of the countries moving age society very soon. So it is very important how we want to introduce this technology hub within Asian. I mean, of course, we have many players, technology players that could assist us in this one. Okay. All right, that's all from me. Thank you very much again for inviting me to this wonderful session.
Well, once again, Siti, Lauren, Mike, Lilian, truly appreciate your being a part of this and sharing your wisdom. Once again, on behalf of all of the partners here, JCIE, OIST, the OIST Foundation and area, we really enjoyed partnering on this and look forward to staying engaged with all of you. I know I certainly learned a lot. Some of my key takeaways: take care of yourself first. Teamwork is important. The dynamism of Asia, and 90 is the new 40. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a good night. Thank you to the audience as well. Take care of yourself.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.